Before we begin, this isn't an attack on your Christmas. It's not here to ruin the warmth, the music, the lights. If this season brings you comfort, keep it close. If your rituals feel holy, protect them. What we're doing tonight isn't about tearing down. It's about digging under, not to break the spell, but to show you the bones that built it. Because nothing in this season is simple. Not the suit, not the sleigh, not the date. And once you see what it's made of, you don't lose the magic. You just see whose hands lit the fire. We all know the imposter, the red suit, the belly, the Coke can smile. He sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. He's painted as the perfect father figure, jolly, kind, watching from afar, but always with a ledger in his hand, checking if you're good or bad. And of course he doesn't work alone. He lives at the top of the world, in the North Pole, in a snow palace run like a factory. Endless rows of toy-making elves, hammering away day and night. Reindeer waiting outside, antlers crowned in bells. And, if you've been good, he'll load up his sleigh. He'll fly across the sky in a single night. He'll slide down the chimney with his sack of gifts. He'll eat the mince pies, drink the milk, maybe nod at Mother Christmas on his way out. Her work done too, but never seen. The story is complete, isn't it? A timeless myth, packaged and gift-wrapped. A father of kindness, industry, and joy. But here's the problem. It's a lie. A college of borrowed bones. A bloodline of gods and shamans and witches, stitched together, domesticated, and sold back to us as if it had always been this way. Because the truth is, this jolly red impostor was never one man at all. He was a storm god. He was a mushroom shaman. He was a witch with silver coins. He was a bishop with a bag of gold. He was a demon with horns. And only when they'd erased the shadows, cut away the visions, silenced the women, wrapped him in sugar and sale signs, did they hand us this version. Smiling, safe, hollow. Before reindeer learned to fly, before bishops climbed rooftops, before Coca-Cola turned winter into an advert, there was only this. A cold breath on the back of your neck, a shadow on the snow, a presence older than myth itself. Father Winter. Every land in the north had him, not as a saint or a gift-giver, not as a father figure, but as winter itself, on two legs. He wasn't jolly, he wasn't kind, he wasn't watching with moral interest. He was seasonal law, the embodiment of hardship, stillness, death, endurance, and the thin thread between survival and loss. He walked with frost in his beard and judgment in his silence. In the Slavic lands he was called Dead Moroz, Grandfather Frost, a towering old man with a staff that froze rivers, a cloak the color of winter midnight, and a face carved by cold. People feared him, respected him, left offerings for him, not to receive gifts, but to avoid wrath. He arrived in snowstorms, shaking frost from his sleeves like curses, yet sometimes, rarely, he blessed the humble, the brave, the ones who endured without arrogance. He was not Santa's ancestor. He was Santa's antithesis. In the oldest winter stories, Morozko tests a girl left in the forest by her stepmother. "Are you warm, my girl?" he asks as the frost bites her bones. And even as her teeth chatter, Even as death curls around her toes, she answers with kindness, humility, grace. Her gentleness softens the frost. Her endurance earns jewels, furs, warmth. Her survival earns blessing. But the stepmother cannot accept it. She believes her own daughter, raised on praise, never corrected, never humbled, deserves the same gifts purely by birth. So she sends her two into the forest, believing Morosco will reward entitlement the way he rewarded humility. But when Morosco asks her the same question, "Are you warm, my girl?" she answers with scorn, with complaint, with arrogance frozen into every breath. And winter does what winter always does. It mirrors what stands before it. Where humility softened the frost, arrogance provokes it. Morosco freezes the girl's cruelty the way he blessed her sister's kindness. That's the winter logic. Santa rewards behavior, but Father Winter, he tests the soul. Nothing is promised. Nothing is guaranteed. The cold shows you exactly who you are. In the Germanic and Nordic world, he appeared as an elder of snow and bone, Old Man Winter. He was the cold half of the year made flesh, white beard, grey cloak, eyes like chipped ice. He ruled the months of hunger, frozen ground, low sun, long nights. And at the solstice, he battled his summer counterpart, the Oak King and Holly King, the Green Man and the Frost King, two halves of the year wrestling over the crown. This is the oldest European myth cycle, a duel of seasons wearing faces. In Celtic lands, the Winter King reigned from Samhain to Imbolc, the dark stretch from autumn's death to the first quiet stirrings beneath the snow. Cold Father, Bone Father, Darkness Keeper. Not malicious, but merciless. He wasn't here to punish humans. He was here to remind them. The world sleeps, the land rests, the seed waits in darkness, and nothing can grow before its time. The Winter King did not bring gifts. He brought necessity, the kind only the cold can teach. Winter once belonged to gods. Before it became sweet and safe, before it came wrapped in velvet and jingle bells, it was a season ruled by fear and reverence. And in the north, one god rode above them all. Odin, the All-Father of the Norse. The one-eyed wanderer who traded his eye for wisdom, who hung on the tree for 9 nights to seize the runes. A god of war, of poetry, of death, a god whose presence was both a blessing and a terror. In Scandinavia, midwinter was his season, the feast of Yule. Fires burned against the darkness, families feasted through the longest nights. But above it all, Odin rode. Not in a sleigh, not with reindeer, but on Sleipnir, his horse with 8 legs, a beast born of Loki's mischief, a mount swift enough to carry its rider across the worlds. And when Odin rode, he did not ride alone. The people believed they could hear it in the winter winds, the howling, the thundering, the crack of the storm. It was the wild hunt, a ghostly procession of the dead, sweeping across the sky in the dark of winter. To step outside and see it was dangerous, for Odin and his host could snatch you, carrying your soul into the storm. Midwinter wasn't cozy. It was a time of awe, of dread, of survival. And yet, Odin could also bless. Children placed their boots by the hearth, filled with hay or carrots for Sleipnir. In return, Odin might leave gifts, small tokens of his favor. Do you hear it? The faint echo that survives even now? The stockings, the gifts, the offerings by the fire? It isn't Santa who invented them. It was Odin, and we've carried it, barely noticing into our Christmas mornings. But here's the fracture. Odin's gift was never safe. It came braided with terror, with the risk of being taken, lost, swept away in the hunt. Father Christmas still wears Odin's beard, still rides through the night, still leaves gifts by the fire. But where Odin could bless or damn, today's Santa only ever smiles, as if winter was ever safe. Now leave the storm of the north behind. Cross further east into Siberia, into the lands of the indigenous reindeer herders, the Evenki, the Chukchi, the Koryak, peoples whose lives were bound to the tundra, to the herds, to the eternal cycle of snow and fire. Their shamans wore cloaks of red and white fur, the colors of the sacred mushroom, Amanita muscaria, bright crimson caps flecked with white, a plant that was not food, not decoration, but a doorway, a way to cross the veil, to speak with spirits, to lead the people through the darkest days of the year. They gathered the mushrooms from beneath the evergreens, where the snow melted in perfect circles. They dried them by the fire, tucked into stockings hung to cure. And when the night of the solstice came, the shaman entered the home not by the front door, buried under the snow, but through the smoke hole at the top of the yurt, sliding down the chimney with his sack of visions. The family waited inside, ready to eat, to drink, to dream. Not toys, not trinkets, but altered sight. Even the reindeer took part. They loved the mushrooms as much as the people did, staggering, leaping, sometimes looking as if they flew. The shaman and the herd, united in the same vision flight through the night sky. And here's a detail they never tell you. The shamans would drink the urine of the reindeer who had eaten the mushrooms. Why? Because the animal's body filtered out the poison, leaving the visions pure, clean, strong. Reindeer urine, red spotted mushrooms. This was the real flight of Father Christmas. And what was it for? Not for obedience, not for lists of naughty and nice. It was a survival ritual, a sacred technology, to guide the people through the solstice, the longest night of the year, the death and rebirth of the sun. The shaman was a psychopomp, a guide between worlds. This was Father Christmas before the bishop, before the corporation, before the elves in the toy factories, a wild, holy man of the snow. That's the Father Christmas I really wish we'd kept. The Amanita shaman with his sack of visions and his reindeer of flight. But for all their thunder and flight, the gods were not the only ones moving through the dark. Behind every storm, a silence watched. Beneath every gift, a hand measured its weight. Because winter has another face, one older than the sleigh, the bishop, or the storm god. Not a man in red, but a woman made of frost and thread and bone. Father Winter never ruled alone. Across the world his counterpart walked beside him. The winter hag, the crone, the bone mother, the feminine face of the cold. Kaljük in Scotland, Frau Holle in Germany, Perkta in the Alps. I've tried really hard to learn all of these names, so I apologize if they still sound wrong, as you say it, with all respect. These were not kindly grandmothers. They were winter, given a woman's face and a spine of stone. In Scotland and Ireland, the Cailleach was older than gods. She raised mountains with her staff. She froze rivers with a glance. Her breath became winter wind. Her footsteps laid frost along the heather. A creator, a destroyer, a keeper of the cold law. No gifts, no punishments, just consequence. In the Germanic lands, Frau Holle spun winter from her spindle. When she shook her feather bed, snow fell on the mortal world. She rewarded the diligent, the girls who spun, cleaned, tended, kept the hearth alive. She punished the idle with pitch that stained them forever. Not cruelty, balance, the winter truth. If you do not carry your share, the cold will take what it's owed. And in the Alps they feared and honored Perchta, white as new snow, dark as the knife she hid in her sleeve. On 12th night she inspected the spinning, the women's sacred winter labor. If the work was done, she left silver in the bowl. If it wasn't, she slit your belly, filled it with straw, and sewed you back together with winter thread. A story sharp enough to keep entire villages working through the long nights. Blessing and blade, winter's feminine law. Further south, Italy kept a softer crown, La Befana. Bent, broom riding, sweeping through January skies. She brought sweets to good children, cold to the rest. In some tales she refused the magi. In others she searched endlessly for the divine child, leaving gifts for every home she passed. The grandmother of midwinter, the last friendly witch at the hearth. And across Scandinavia lived the Yule mothers, veiled women of the spinning room, guardians of the kitchen, the cradle, the fire. Quiet, domestic, powerful. They blessed households that honored the winter work and turned their backs on those who did not. These winter women were not monsters. They were law. Where Father Winter froze the land, the crown judged the people. They rewarded effort, honesty, discipline, contribution. They punished deceit, laziness, neglect. They protected the hidden seeds through the darkest days of the year. They kept the balance that allowed life to return in spring. This was the feminine face of winter, the keeper of thresholds, the guardian of the hearth, the judge of the long dark. And then Christianity swept through the mountains, and as always, the women were the first to be rewritten. The good halves became saints. The dangerous halves became witches. Their rituals were outlawed, their stories split and sanitized, their names painted over. And into the space where they had stood, fierce, balanced, old as night, the church installed a father. The crown was buried under the snow, her blade taken, her silver repurposed, her stories rewritten into cautionary tales for children. Santa arrived with soft velvet and harmless jingles, and the winter women vanished from the hearth. But myths don't die. They sink. They wait. Perchta still stalks the Alpine passes. Frau Holle still shakes feathers over Germany. Kalyuk still breathes across the highlands. La Befana still sweeps the Italian night. And if you listen closely to the crackle of the fire, you can still hear the Yule mothers laugh. They were here before the father. They will be here long after him. And just as the winter women once stood beside the hearth, judging the soul, the men who followed the saint walked behind him in shadow. So far we've met the storm god, the shaman, the witches, but there's another layer stitched into Father Christmas, the companions who walked beside him, because the story was never just one man handing out gifts. There was always a shadow at his side. In the Alps they called him Krampus, horned, fanged, hooves crunching on the snow, chains rattling, a demonic figure dragging behind St. Nicholas like a warning. Nicholas carried gifts for the good children. Krampus carried birch rods for the bad. Nicholas left fruit and nuts. Krampus stuffed the disobedient into sacks, drag them screaming into the dark. A duet of saint and demon, good cop, bad cop, heaven and hell parading together through the streets. In German he had another shadow, Knecht Ruprecht, farmhand Rupert, a suit-covered man, staff in hand, bag of ashes on his back. He asked children if they could pray. Those who could were rewarded. Those who could not were beaten with a stick. Sometimes he was Nicola's servant, sometimes his dark double. Always the enforcer, the punisher, the shadow that made the saints smile mean something. And there were others still, Black Peters, Ashen Men, dark companions whose names changed with the valley, but whose role never shifted, to terrify children into obedience, to make the carrot taste sweeter by swinging the stick in the shadows. And what did the church do with these companions? They split the story in half. St. Nicholas kept the gifts. The shadows were demonized, pushed to the edges of folklore. The Good Shepherd remained. The monsters were locked in basements and fairy tales, until all that was left for the Christmas hearth was the smile without the teeth, a father without his shadow, an amputated myth. But make no mistake, every time you see Santa smile, there's a horned shadow standing just behind him, watching, waiting, because a gift without consequence, a blessing without danger, is not how the story began. After the storm god, after the shaman, after the witches and their brooms, a bishop walks in. Nicholas of Myra, 4th century, Lycia, on the southern coast of what is now Turkey, a real man wrapped in legends like winter cloaks. Rome is shifting, empires bending, councils convening to decide what counts as truth. They'll say Nicholas punched a heretic at Nicaea, as you say it. A story of doctrine with a fist inside it. They'll say he saved sailors from storms, fed a starving city by persuading merchants to break their cargo seals, and resurrected 3 boys butchered and burned by an innkeeper. Man, this guy did a lot. The point isn't whether every miracle happened. The point is what he became. A saint you could use. Here's the tale that stitched him into our hearths. A poor father with 3 daughters. No dowries, no hope. At night, Nicholas creeps to the house and throws a bag of gold through the window. Some say 3 nights, 3 bags. Some say 1 bag each year. Some say the gold fell into stockings drying by the fire. Others swear he dropped it down the chimney. Either way, the girls are saved from prostitution. Their future bought with the bishop's stealth and a bag of coins. It's a heart-warming story. But look again. A woman's fate bought and bartered. A father's honor guarded by marriage as rescue. Charity? Yes. But charity that keeps the structure intact. He becomes the patron of brides, of children, of sailors, and of pawnbrokers. Those 3 golden balls outside the shop, they are Nicola's legacy, the miracle turned into a trade sign. Pre-Christian winter was a wild creature. Odin's hunt howling above, shamans dosing the night with mushrooms, goddesses with coins and knives at the hearth. The church needed something usable, a figure who could embody generosity while domesticating ecstasy. Nicholas fit like a key in a lock. He visited at night, left secret gifts, and tied virtue to behavior. Be devout, be diligent, be obedient, and the bishop will bless your house. Fail, and his shadow will take a switch to your legs. His feast is the 6th of December. In medieval Europe, children left shoes or stockings out on Nicholas Eve and woke to sweets, nuts, little coins. In some places, a boy bishop was elected. A child in mitre and cope leading processions, a carnival inversion that still happened under clerical eyes. The rhythm was set. Winter gifts now belonged to a saint's calendar, not to the moon, the mushrooms, or the storm. Then came the theft that crowned him. In 1087, sailors from Bari stole Nicola's bones from Myra and enshrined them in Italy. Pilgrims poured in. Money followed. A city rose on the saint's back. Relics meant economy. Pilgrimage meant roads, inns, offerings. The saint's body became a harbour, his cult a currency. The church had harnessed winter generosity to a machine. And Nicholas rarely walked alone. We've met his shadows, Krampus, Knecht Ruprecht, the switch and the sack pacing the saint's footsteps. Nicholas asks if you can pray. The companion carries the rod. Blessing and punishment, saint and enforcer. The carrot tasted sweeter when the stick rattled behind it. Then Europe cracks. The Reformation strips saints from calendars, smashes images, bans Christmas in places like Puritan England. Nicholas should have faded, but he survives wherever the people can't let him go, especially in the Low Countries. In the Netherlands he becomes Sinterklaas, a bishop on a white horse arriving by boat, visiting on 5th of December, leaving sweets and small gifts in shoes. He still has a companion, once painted black, a tangled legacy now wrestled into soot instead of skin. The shadow clings to the saint like a bird to wool. Then the hinge of the world swings. Sinterklaas sails to New Amsterdam, and the name softens. From Sint Nicholas, Sinterklaas, to Santa Claus. The bishop's mitre shrinks into a fur cap. The horse becomes reindeer. The feast drifts from 6th of December to 25th of December. A saint is turning into a season. Ask why this strand won when Odin thundered and witches flew. Because Nicholas made power palatable. He preached generosity without psychedelic danger, obedience without outright terror. He folded the winter rite into clerical order, into a ledger that could be checked, blessed, and policed. He is the hinge between mushrooms and shopping mall, between storm god and television advert. Without Nicholas, there's no neat way to stitch ecstasy to economics. And yet the seam is visible if you hold it to the fire. The chimney, the stockings, the night visit, the secret gift, the behavioral test, all older than the department store, all older than the poem, all gathered under a bishop's robe so winter could be managed. Remember this when you tell the story to children. Before the red suit and the fairy lights, before the North Pole factory and the mince pies, a bishop stood at your hearth. He taught you how to behave, and he taught you who held the keys. The gift was real. So was the leash. And while the rest of Europe followed the bishop's shadow, slippers by the fire, gifts in the night, saints and switches, one country didn't follow him at all. Not to the chimney, not to the sleigh, not even into winter. To see how strange this really is, we have to go to Portugal. Let's step out of the forests of the north and into a different winter, the Portuguese one. The one with olive trees, hearth embers, codfish steam, and a silence heavy enough to swallow whole centuries. And the first thing you need to know is this. For most of its history, Portugal had no Santa Claus, no Father Christmas, no red suit, no sleigh, no chimney stories. Portugal simply didn't carry that myth. So what was the Portuguese Christmas like? Christmas in Portugal wasn't about gifts. It was about consoada, A long sacred family meal on the 24th. Cod, cabbage, bread, roasted chestnuts, the table laid for the living, and sometimes a plate left for the dead. It was firelight. It was candlelight. It was the smell of wood smoke in stone houses. And after dinner, the Missa do Galo, the midnight mass. Families walking through the cold night, breath in the air, bells echoing from the parish tower. That was Christmas. Food, faith, fire, family. But not presents, not magic men, not gift rituals. If Portuguese children got gifts at all, they came not at Christmas, but on January 6th, Dia de Reis, the Day of the Three Kings. What kids received was nuts, dried fruit, honey cakes, king cake, bolo rei, a small coin, little handmade toys. Simple, rural, blessing-based. The kings were the gift bringers because they brought offerings to Jesus. Not a father figure, not a saint, not a supernatural visitor, just the kings completing their journey. Over time, the church reshaped the winter myth. The kings stepped back, and a new figure stepped forward. O Menino Jesus, the baby Jesus. Invisible, holy, silent, judging. He didn't slide down chimneys. He didn't leave sleigh tracks. He appeared like a breath, if you behaved. Portugal replaced magic with morality. No storm god, no shaman, no witch goddess. Just a newborn with a ledger made of light. While the rest of Europe crowned St. Nicholas, Odin, Perkta, Father Christmas, Portugal said, no. Santa was too northern, too Protestant, too foreign, too joyful, too secular. Baby Jesus fit the Catholic home. Santa did not. So the cradle stayed, and the sleigh stayed out. And as the world modernized, the gift day crept, from January 6th to the morning of December 25th, and eventually to Christmas Eve. Influences? Urban life, people gathering on the 24th, neighboring European customs, convenience. But the gift bringer remained the same. Baby Jesus. Under Salazar's dictatorship, the baby Jesus narrative hardened. The regime wanted obedience, humility, family order, Catholic unity. So schools, churches, and children's books all repeated, it's the baby Jesus that brings the presents. Santa was unwelcome. Baby Jesus was state-approved. And here comes the turning point. Television arrives. American films arrive. Adverts arrive. Coca-Cola arrives. And with them, Father Christmas. Imported, packaged, red-suited, reindeer-friendly. Not myth, marketing. Portugal didn't evolve Santa organically. He landed by plane, not sleigh. By the late 80s and 90s, Father Christmas finally replaces baby Jesus in most homes. And when you place Portugal in the great winter tapestry, you see the contrast. While the north had Odin thundering through icy skies, while Siberia had shamans sliding down smoke holes, while the Alps had Perkta and her silver coins and straw-stuffed bellies, while England had the green-robed revelry spirit, Portugal crowned a cradle. Not a god, not a witch, not a saint. A newborn. Portugal chose silence over spectacle, devotion over danger, obedience over misrule, the cradle over the cauldron. It is the softest winter myth and the most controlled. But while Portugal kept its winter soft and silent, across the sea England chose the opposite. A Christmas loud enough to shake the frost from the rafters. While Nicholas was busy crossing seas and calendars, England was brewing its own spirit. Not a saint, not a storm god, but a personification of the season itself. They called him Father Christmas. Picture not the jolly red suit. Picture instead a long green robe, fur-trimmed, holly in the beard, a goblet in one hand, a roast bird in the other. Less North Pole factory manager and more lord of misrule. Father Christmas wasn't born in a bishop's mitre. He was born in the alehouse. In medieval and Tudor England, Christmas was feasting, drinking, carnival. 12 days of misrule, where masters served servants and the world turned upside down. Fires burned, carols rattled through the night, plays filled with vice and folly trod the boards. Father Christmas entered as the embodied season, a character in Mama's plays and masks. He didn't come with gifts for children. He came with excess for adults. Wine, laughter, debauchery, the raw spirit of Yule dressed in a furred robe. And then the axe fell. The Puritans in the 17th century despised Christmas. Too Catholic, too pagan, too wild. In 1647, Parliament under Cromwell banned Christmas outright. Shops stayed open, churches closed, feasting forbidden. But Father Christmas refused to die. Pamphlets appeared with his image, an old man, ragged and pleading, crying that he had been seized and imprisoned by Parliament. The people rioted. They fought to bring back their holiday. And in those years, Father Christmas wasn't jolly at all. He was political resistance, a symbol of the people's right to feast, to make merry, to own their winter fire. With the Restoration in 1660, Christmas returned, and with it Father Christmas. He shifted into printed broadsheets, plays and carols. No longer just a revelry. Now he was nostalgia. The old man who reminded people of warmth, hearth, and hospitality. But remember, he still wasn't for children. He was for households, for community, for wassail bowls passed from hand to hand. Fast forward to the 19th century. The Victorians reinvent Christmas. Dickens with his ghosts, trees imported from Germany, cards and carols polished into middle-class virtue. And into this mix walks Father Christmas, still robed in green, still a symbol of plenty, now tamed into the kindly elder. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the Dutch Sinterklaas has already softened into Santa Claus, a fur-clad, pipe-smoking elf who flies across rooftops in Washington Irving's tales, and later climbs into Clement Clarke Moore's poem. By the late Victorian age, England and America are trading images back and forth. Father Christmas merges with Santa. The old green-robed revelry spirit slowly turns red, slowly turns child-focused, slowly loses his goblet for a toy sack. So here's the English contribution to the bloodline. Not terror, not shamanic visions, not saintly obedience, but revelry. The permission to feast, to laugh, to riot, to burn the dark away with wine and song. Father Christmas was never about surveillance, never about lists. He was the human face of winter joy. And yet, when he fused with Santa, even that spirit was trimmed and tidied. The green robe turned red, the goblet became a ledger, and the laughter was swallowed by jingles. Father Christmas survived the centuries, but the next transformation wouldn't come from myth or ritual. It would come from a brand. There's one more thread that binds the suit tight, the stitch that locked Father Christmas into the shape we know. The brand, the advertisement, the Santa Claus of Coca-Cola. In 1823, a poem was published anonymously in a New York paper, A Visit from St. Nicholas. You know it better as "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." This is where the sleigh lands. The reindeer get their names. The chimney becomes his doorway. The saint transforms into a jolly elf, round, merry, magical, carrying toys. It wasn't scripture, it was verse. But in a young America, it became gospel all the same. Then comes Thomas Nast, Civil War cartoonist, in the 1860s. He draws Santa in Harper's Weekly, plump, bearded, fur-clad, sometimes green, sometimes brown, sometimes red, sometimes tiny, sometimes full-sized. In one image he even spies on children with a telescope, a Victorian twist on the all-seeing eye. By Nast's hand, Santa becomes more than a poem. He becomes an image the public can pin to their walls. He becomes propaganda. In one drawing, he even hands out gifts to Union soldiers, a saint drafted for war. But the final stitch comes in the 1930s. Coca-Cola hires artist Odin to paint Santa for winter advertising. And there he is. The red suit, bright as the Coke label, the white fur trim, the rosy cheeks, the hearty belly, a fatherly man, warm, safe, endlessly jolly. And suddenly, the world believes he has always looked this way. Never mind Odin's storm. Never mind the mushroom's visions. Never mind the witches with knives or the bishop with his bag of gold. Santa now belongs to the brand. The global Coca-Cola Claus was born. Think about that. A god who once swept souls into the night sky. A shaman who slid down chimneys with visions of fire and snow. A crone who left silver or straw inside your belly. All boiled down into a soft drink advert. That's the inversion. The wild midwinter spirit turned into a shopping mascot. The fire of the solstice sold back to us in glass bottles. And we still sit our children on his knee, whispering wishes into the ear of a corporation's ghost. But if you really want to understand how deep the rewrite goes, don't look at the man in the suit. Look at what he replaced. Because the oldest myth of this season wasn't about a man at all. It was about a sun that died and rose again. Before the edits and the rewrites and the calendar coups, there was only this, the longest night of the year. For 3 days after the solstice, the sun appears to stand still, not rising higher, not climbing back, just hovering, like a dying ember in the hearth of the sky. And ancient people watched it with their breath held. To the Egyptians, these were the days when Ra sailed through the underworld to battle the serpent of chaos. To the Norse, it was Mother's Night, when the Disir, the ancestral mothers, kept vigil in the dark so the light could return. To the Romans, it was Sol Invictus, the Unconquered Sun, reborn on December 25th, after his descent into shadow. Different names, different myths, same turning point. The sun died and then rose again. So when the church built its calendar on top of the bones it was burying, December 25th wasn't chosen by accident. It was the sun's return, the light's resurrection, the day the sky turned toward life again. Not because it was historically true, but because it was symbolically irresistible. The solstice already told the story. A dying god, a long night, a slow return to light. All they had to do was place a new name on the day. And before the date was claimed by saints and rewritten by empire, the Romans already had a festival in place. A week-long ritual that shook the calendar loose. The solstice party that burned bright enough for even the church to fear it. Saturnalia, the time of Saturn, held each year in December, around the 17th to the 23rd. Saturnalia honored Saturn, the god of time, agriculture, and golden ages. A god with a cycle in one hand and the past in the other. He ruled before the gods of Olympus. He ruled in peace. And once a year the Romans brought him back. For one wild week, order was reversed. The courts closed, schools stopped, work ceased, even war paused. Slaves were served by their masters. The poor mocked the rich. Men dressed as women. Fools were crowned as kings. The streets echoed with laughter, feasting, dice games, and songs. People gifted candles to bring light into the dark, and small clay figurines called sigillaria, symbols of the old offerings once made to Saturn through human sacrifice. Even that had softened, from blood and bone to toys and treats. But the memory lingered. Every household chose a mock king, a lord of misrule, a servant or jester elevated to rule the feast. He gave absurd commands: dance on the table, drink backwards, speak in rhyme, and everyone obeyed until the holiday ended. Then the roles snapped back, order returned, and the fool became a servant again. It was carnival before carnival, a ritualized rupture, a chance to vent the year's pressure through chaos, through comedy, through inversion. And buried underneath it all, a shadow of something darker, because in earlier rites, the king crowned for Saturnalia was real. And at the end of the feast, he was sacrificed, a season borrowed from death, mocked, feasted, then killed. This is the festival the church couldn't compete with, so instead of trying to erase it, they absorbed it, they renamed it, they hid it in plain sight. The gifts were kept, the feasts were kept, even the date stayed close. They just traded the Lord of Misrule for a jolly saint with a bag of toys. So when people say Christ was born on December 25th, because that's when the light came into the world, it's worth remembering the light was already being welcomed back, with dice, with song, with reversal and fire. The stage was already built, the celebration already burning. All the church had to do was name it something new. The 25th of December is a date you were taught to treat as sacred, as tradition set in stone, the day Christ was born, the day the light entered the world, the reason for the season. But the truth is, he most certainly wasn't born then. There's no records with dates. The Gospels never say December. The shepherds were sleeping in fields, which only happened in spring or early autumn, when the nights were mild enough. There's no astronomical event to match, no early church tradition, not even a theological reason to place the nativity at the winter solstice. The earliest Christians didn't celebrate Jesus' birth at all. They honored his death, his resurrection, not arrival, but return. So where does December 25th come from? It comes from empire, from Sol Invictus, the Roman sun god, reborn after the longest night. From Mithras, a Persian deity born on the 25th, worshipped by Roman soldiers, a light-bringer, a savior, honored in underground temples across the empire. From older solstice festivals, the ones that sang the sun back into the sky, long before the church had political power. And it comes from a very old tactic. Don't fight the story. Absorb it. Rename it. Sanctify it. Make people forget where it came from. In 336 Common Era, Rome celebrated Jesus' birth on December 25th for the first time, not because the date was remembered, because it was useful. The people were already gathering. The sun was already rising again. The land already knew how to celebrate light returning. All they had to do was change the name. And the story stuck. People didn't resist. They adapted. They mapped their joy onto the new shape and passed it to their children as if it had always been there. That's how time gets changed. Not with violence, but with certainty. Repeat a date long enough, and it feels like it's always been true. Until anyone who questions it sounds like they're trying to ruin Christmas. But here's the thing. If it ever struck you as strange to celebrate a birth in the deepest dark of winter, when no animals give birth, when nothing grows, when even your own body slows down, you weren't being cynical. You were remembering something older than the story you were given, something the sky never stopped telling, even when the calendar did. Let's be honest. We've all been told not to ruin things. Don't ask about the date. Don't overthink the nativity. Don't ruin it for the kids. But no one tells you. It was already a rewrite. The story changed. The date changed. The festival changed. And we didn't ask. And not because we were stupid, not because we were wrong, but because tradition trains obedience. Ask too much, and you notice things. That the year starts when your body is still resting. That the holy days don't match the land. That your rest is rationed. That your joy feels pre-scheduled. And once you notice, you might want something else. That's why you're told not to ask. Because memory is dangerous, and silence is easier to govern than rhythm. And maybe that's the part that always catches me. We inherit these holidays like heirlooms, passed down by hands that forgot where they came from. Storms, mushrooms, bishops, brands. A calendar built by strangers, but the bones underneath, the solstice, the mothers in the dark, the moon rhythms, the wild gods, the sky returning, they never left. They just waited to be remembered. When you strip a holiday to its bones, you start to see your own. And maybe that's why my story with Christmas was always jagged, always sideways, always slightly out of rhythm. Not because there was something wrong with me, but because something was wrong with the world I was asked to follow. So before I close this episode, before we leave the storm god and the shaman and the bishop and the brand behind, I want to tell you something personal, the part that shaped how I see all of this. Because myth is inherited, but so is silence. And I grew up inside a very particular silence. I never had Christmas or birthdays. Those were forbidden, pagan, wrong. And in a way, I'm glad, because that's one of the spells that never took really a deep root in me. But as a child, I didn't see it like that. I only saw what every child sees, what I couldn't have. The lights, the presents, the stockings, the magic kept away. And I used to feel the absence, the ache of being left out. But here's the truth of it. I didn't grow up without that magic completely. I grew up with a different kind. I got presents all through the year, unexpected, unscheduled. They meant more because they were surprises, and they didn't come with a silent contract of, now you owe me one back. And family? We gathered often, not once or twice because the calendar said so, but whenever we could. Lunches, dinners, togetherness as a rhythm, not performance. And that was my Christmas. And looking back, I wouldn't trade it. I wish I'd kept it all my life. But the system has a way of resetting you, poking, prodding, whispering that you're missing something, that your children will miss out. And by the time I had my own boys, I had forgotten what I'd had. Funny, isn't it? I only remembered the ache of being excluded, and I didn't want them to feel it. So down the rabbit hole I went. I bought the toys. I made the lists. I made the debt. I let the red suit walk into my house. And for what? Toys played with for a week, then forgotten. Another year, another round, another debt. And when I looked around, I saw the same story everywhere. Neighbors celebrating Christmas through New Year, the same rhythm on repeat. Wake whenever, pour the drinks, pile the food, hand the children their presents so they'll stay quiet while the adults drink again. Alcohol, food, noise, morning into night, over and over. And me? I was never one for booze. I drank, yes, because it was expected, legal, and accepted. But it was never my favorite spell. So I did it differently. After the presents, after the Christmas dinner, we'd go for a walk, try to breathe some air back into the day. And then came the moment that split it all open. After our rock, my mother-in-law passed away. That's when the magic died, and that's when the veil lifted. Because it's funny, although not funny, how dark events can open the light, how death can strip the tinsel, burn down the wrapping paper, and show you what was always underneath. And underneath, it wasn't magic. It was just noise, just debt, just alcohol and obligation. And it took grief to remind me. The truth I once had was better all along. A truth I'd forgotten, but one I could finally return to. So here we are. The suit is open. The bones are on the table. And the truth is, it was never just one man in red. It was a college, a machine, a spell. And maybe that's all right. Maybe every age gets the Father Christmas it deserves. A storm god for a world of dread. A shaman for a world that still believed in visions. A bishop for a world of obedience. A brand for a world of debt. But ask yourself this, when you hang your stockings, who are you really calling? The god? The shaman? The witch? The saint? The mascot? Or just the empty suit? Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of you that follow me. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for listening. Please do give us a star. Do rate us. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And thank you to Viagens Obscuras for giving us shout outs, pretty much all the time. I feel like I hog most of that time. Love to you girls. Have a good holiday. Have a good holiday, all of you. And if you've got threads of your own, come and share them. Find me on Instagram at Bloodline Myths. Ask your questions. Give me your cracks, your stories, your fire. Because these myths don't belong to Coca-Cola. They belong to us. And I want to hear what you see when you strip the red suit back. Have a good holiday, everyone. Love and peace. Till next time. Bye.